My name is Leslie, and I'm a solutions engineer here at GitHub. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about GitHub Copilot and how it can help accelerate your organization's pace of development and make your developers' lives a whole lot better. So let's get started. I want to kick things off by making sure we're on the same page, and that means discussing the what, how, and why of Copilot. Beginning with the what. What is Copilot? Well, a really basic definition is Copilot is an AI-powered peer programmer designed to help you write code faster and with less work. So with that in mind, we of course want to meet developers where they are with Copilot, which definitely means being available in the IDE. We are available in all of the IDEs shown here: Xcode, Eclipse, Visual Studio Code, Azure Data Studio, the JetBrains suite of IDEs, and Visual Studio. But I do want to add the caveat that not every single feature we see today is necessarily going to be available in all of these IDEs. Typically, things come to Visual Studio Code first, and then they propagate out to the other IDEs from there. So if you're working in Xcode and you notice that you're missing a specific feature, it may just not have made it to that IDE yet. All right, so of course being available in the IDE is critical, but we did some studies because here at GitHub, we like to study developers and how they work, and we found that developers spend up to 85% of their time not in the IDE, doing other things. So that made it very clear that it is important for us not only to be available in the IDE, but really at every stage of the SDLC possible to ensure Copilot is there to maximize developers' effectiveness. With that in mind, we've brought GitHub Copilot to the GitHub platform itself, and we'll see some of those features in our demo today. We'll also talk a little bit at the end of today's presentation about what the future of GitHub Copilot in the platform looks like. All right. Cool, so that's our what. Now let's move on to our how. How does Copilot work behind the scenes? Well, on the right, you can see what a developer might find in their typical IDE. I will be honest, I used to be a developer and I don't think I ever had a Go, Ruby, JavaScript, and Java file open all at once, but for the sake of the presentation, we will suspend disbelief. All right, so if a developer wanted to interact with Copilot, they could do something like this. They could write a comment and maybe a function header, and that information, along with pieces of the file that's in focus and those other open tabs that we see, will be sent by Copilot as context to the appropriate LLM running in the cloud. That LLM is going to then provide a suggestion, which Copilot passes back to the developer. Now, there's a couple important things to call out here. The first is that this interaction is ephemeral. Once the suggestion is provided, the context of the suggestion, none of that is saved. Additionally, those LLMs that are running in the cloud are not going to use your code for training purposes. So that is not something that you need to be concerned about. And then finally, you can see it's still up to the developer to decide whether they want to accept this suggestion, maybe take it and tweak it a little bit, or just reject the suggestion outright. We named this tool Copilot for a reason, and that reason is that the developer is still in charge and ultimately responsible for any code that is submitted. All right, so there's our how. Let's move on to our why. Why might Copilot be useful for your organization? Well, we believe it's for these three key reasons called out on the slide. The first is maximizing developer happiness. When developers have a tool like Copilot that can help take away the super tedious parts of their job that they have to do but don't really want to do, well, that allows them to focus on more high-impact, challenging work, which is probably the reason they became developers in the first place. So that makes them happier, and happier developers are more likely to stay with your organization longer. They're more likely to have better work outputs and to uplift others in the organization through mentoring, for example. All right, cool. So I mentioned better work outputs, and that leads me into the second point of developer productivity. I like to use a bit of a simplistic example here, but hopefully it shows the type of impact Copilot can have on an organization. Let's say you have an organization of 100 developers, and Copilot saves each developer just 30 minutes a week. Well, for the organization all up, that's 3,000 minutes a week, which translates into 12,000 minutes per month, which translates into 144,000 minutes per year. That's 144,000 minutes that developers are no longer spending on low value, drudgery type tasks, and instead are focused on more high impact work that's going to drive your organization's development forward. And that brings me to the final point of accelerating software development. When developers are happy, when they are productive, well, the pace of your development is naturally going to increase, not to mention the quality of the code that is produced. All right, so that brings us to the end of our what, how, and why. However, before we jump into our demo, I do want to mention a few things about prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is essentially the art of interacting with agents like Copilot to get the most effective suggestions from them. You can go really deep on this. You can read articles. You can even read books about prompt engineering. So with these few points, we're just barely scratching the surface, but I did want to highlight them so you can keep them in mind as we're going through the demo. The first is to start general and then get specific. Things are going to work out better for you if you give Copilot an idea of where you're trying to go and then you work with it to refine the implementation. Additionally, it's important to break down complex tasks. This is, of course, a software engineering best practice in general, although not one that we all always follow, but it's going to give you much better results to give Copilot smaller, simpler tasks than to give it a bunch of word vomit and see what it produces. Keep your history fresh. You will see me numerous times throughout the demo click a plus icon that's available to you in your Copilot chat window. This opens a new session with Copilot and ensures that the new prompt you're going to give to Copilot isn't polluted by the previous chat history that you had with it for the previous prompt. So it's very important to keep history fresh. Avoid ambiguity. Make sure you are as clear as you possibly can be when you are interacting with Copilot. And to that point, when you are able to, give examples of exactly what you're looking for, because that's going to allow Copilot to better understand what you're seeking and give you that much better suggestions. Okay, cool. Now let's get to the exciting part, the demo. Today we're going to be working in this application. It's called Shoe Hero, and essentially I made it because I am a runner and I really try to prioritize keeping track of the mileage on my running shoes, because anytime we top out over 400 miles, it's about time for me to change out the shoe to prevent injury. So I got tired of doing this in a spreadsheet and I thought, why not make a nice, pretty application to do it instead? If we click on this View Shoes link, we are taken to a page of all the shoes. I just seeded some dummy data in our database. And if we go to this Brooks Ghost 15, which looks to be a little bit older, and we go and look at activities, we can see we have a lot of activities associated with this shoe. And in fact, it's over that 400-mile marker that I called out. So there's a couple things that I'd like to fix with this page. The first is that this header is pretty terrible, as well as the highlight. You can't actually see anything when you're highlighting or in the header. And I'd like to highlight this in red. When I'm over 400 miles, I want to know. I want to make it very, very obvious. Leslie, it is time to retire this shoe. So let's see if Copilot can help us fix these little issues. All right, I have got Copilot open here in Visual Studio, I've got the project open here in Visual Studio Code, and I just want to quickly show how easy it is to get up and running with Copilot here in Visual Studio Code. If you just click the extensions button and you search for Copilot, you will find two results. The first is going to be GitHub Copilot, which is going to give you all the features of Copilot that your heart could desire. And the second is Copilot Chat, which is just going to give you chat. So I highly recommend installing this top one. It's going to bring chat along with it. And of course, you're going to be able to maximize your usage of Copilot features. So I'm going to hit this install button. And you can see that we have got Copilot installed. Now, if I want to start working with Copilot, all I have to do is click this cute little Copilot head here, and it'll pop up my chat window for me. Now, there's a few things about the chat window I want to discuss because I know there's a lot going on and I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So the first thing is that you can anchor the chat window pretty much anywhere in the IDE you want it to go. I like to leave it over on the right because I'm a big fan of having my Explorer view to navigate my files, my chat view as well on the right, and then my terminal down at the bottom. So I'm a curmudgeon, that's never going to change, and this layout just works for me, but choose your own adventure. All right, cool. So this is the plus icon that I mentioned that allows you to start a new chat with Copilot, again, just to make sure you're not polluting your context with previous chats. This history is going to allow you to, the little clock button is going to allow you to view your chat history with Copilot if you want to go back and look at anything. This is going to allow you to open chat directly in the editor if you'd like to do that, or you could pop it into a new window of its own. This, of course, will allow you to close chat. This button allows you to add context to chat. I generally prefer to just drag and drop files into the chat. I just find that a little bit easier, and you'll see me do that a number of times during today's demo. All right, this @ button allows you to access what are called extensions. Extensions are specialized helpers that allow you to get assistance with very specific things. So I know that sounds a little bit abstract, but if we want to look at a concrete example, we could invoke the @VS Code extension. And that's going to be an extension that is designated to help us with any question we have pertaining to VS Code itself. So in this instance, I'm going to ask it how to enable the next edit suggestions feature of Copilot. And you can see that it's using the VS Code extension. You've got the VS Code logo there to designate that, and it gives me an answer. And also allows me to open up my settings editor so that I can just go ahead and click this checkbox and enable that setting. So that's how extensions can be useful to you for navigating Visual Studio Code, for navigating the code base, for doing those very specific types of tasks. All right. Oh, I should also mention, Next Edit Suggestions is a feature of GitHub Copilot that essentially tries to guess what you're going to do next. So if you're typing, it will try to complete things for you and then maybe skip to the next place where it thinks you're going to want to go. So it's a little bit more advanced than the basic completion scenario that we saw on the how slide. It's a really neat feature, and it's roughly equivalent to the cursor tab, tab, tab feature. All right, very good. Now, this microphone will allow you to speak prompts to Copilot, very, very handy instead of having to type. This drop-down will allow you to switch the Copilot mode that you're using, and we're going to use this pretty heavily in today's demo, so definitely look out for me to make these switches and talk a little bit more about what each mode will do for you. All right, this allows you to select the model you would like to use with Copilot. So my strategy is to keep it on the Copilot base model unless I find myself in a scenario where it's going to really behoove me to switch. And the reason for this is that we are introducing next month, we're in May right now, so next month will be June, we're introducing a premium requests feature. Essentially, when you start switching models in chat, you're going to use up part of your premium request quota that you get each month. If you're a developer working on the Copilot business plan, you're going to get 300 premium requests. If you're a developer working on the Copilot enterprise plan, you will get 1,000. You can purchase more premium requests if you run out, or you may just be locked into the base model, which costs no premium requests until the next month begins. So again, my strategy is to just stick with the base unless I find myself in a situation where I can really benefit from using another model. Okay, so as we conclude our tour of the chat window, I want to quickly talk about what Copilot can help you with versus what it cannot help you with. So I'm going to give a real life example. One time I was up pretty late programming. I was eating ice cream straight out of the pint. Not my proudest moment, but it happened. And I asked Copilot, do you like ice cream? And just as it did then, it's going to do now. It will shut me down very, very quickly. And the reason for that is that Copilot is designed and trained to specifically help with programming related issues. It probably has no idea what ice cream even is. So of course it cannot tell me whether it likes it or not. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and put ourselves back into the fix mode we were in when we were looking at the site and looking at those little issues that we want to correct. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the shoe page that maps to the page we were looking at. And I'm going to scroll to the bottom where we have a table, this table of activities that we saw on the site. And you can see that when I highlighted the table, those lines were automatically added as context to Copilot. So I use highlighting pretty heavily to really tell Copilot, hey, you should hone in on this. All right, very good. So I'm going to say, this is not legible in dark mode. Make the header and highlight darker. And let's see what Copilot comes up with here. Oh, it looks like it's still hanging on to VS Code there. So you can simply click that rerun without link to go back to normal Copilot mode if you find yourself in that situation. All right, cool. So you can see Copilot has given me a suggestion here. And I have a couple of options for getting the suggestion out of chat and into my editor. I can click on this diff button, which will allow me to see a little bit of a diff view of what's going to change before I apply it. I can insert directly at my cursor. This is my favorite because it just drops it right in there for you. I can do an old school copy and paste. I can insert into my terminal or into a new file. Now in this situation, I'm going to use my favorite button because like I said, it just drops it right in there for me with minimal clicking and copying and pasting and whatnot. All right, very good. So let's jump back into the site and see, oh, this is looking much better. Okay, lovely. We can actually read things now. Perfect. Okay, let's move on to making this red. So I'm going to, not go into PowerPoint, whoopsie daisies. I'm going to go back into Visual Studio Code here, and I'm going to scroll up to this place that refers to the total distance. And instead of using my chat window on the right, I'm actually going to hit Command I, it would be Control I on Windows, to open up what's called an inline chat. As you can see, this is just a very easily accessible chat that you can open and ask a question, and then it will present a really nice diff view of the response to you. So I love inline chat. I use it pretty heavily because it minimizes disruptions to my flow. All right, so here we can say, make this red if over 400, green if not. All right, and as you can see, we get that nice diff view. The change looks pretty good to me, so I'm gonna go ahead and accept it and save it. And let's jump back into our site, and lo and behold, we can see this is now red. If we go back to view shoes and jump into a shoe that has less miles, we can also see that it is correctly coded as green now. All right, very good. So we fixed those little issues, but, oh, I gotta stop putting myself back in PowerPoint. We fixed those little issues, but we still need to clean up one other thing that I have noticed about this application. And that's that if we click into this API directory, we can see we have tests set up for our activities routes, but we don't have any tests set up for our shoe routes. So let's go ahead and have Copilot help us fix this. So of course, I'm going to open up a new chat window here, and then I'm going to flip over from ask mode into edit mode. Edit mode essentially allows you to modify multiple files with Copilot, maybe add some new files that don't already exist. So it's really useful for a task like this where you're trying to do multiple different things, right? We're gonna end up with 2 different new testing files, one for each shoe route file. All right, so context is key. As always, we're going to make sure that we grab the existing test file and then, of course, the route files that we want to have tests for. And we're going to say, write unit tests for the shoe routes and see what Copilot comes up with here. All right, so you can see that it's thinking and it has presented us with our first file here. That's something I really like about edit mode is you can generally review files as it's still iterating and implementing changes for you. So we see that we have this nice test file. It's green. That's usually good enough for me. So I'm going to select to keep it. I'm going to select to keep that one as well. And we are good to go. Now we do have some green check marks here, which make me think everything's okay, but let's just double check down in the terminal. We will look at our tests, which are continuously running on changes, and we can see that everything has passed. Very good. Okay. So now we've got our tests, we've got our bug fixes. I think I'm ready to go ahead and commit these changes. Now, back in the day, I used to write out my own commit messages, and it was a bit tedious, right? Developers generally don't like documentation. But now, Copilot writes my commit messages on my behalf, and it does them according to my specifications. And the way that you can set this up is by going into your Visual Studio Code settings and searching for commit message. I believe will get us there. Yep, you can see we have this commit message generation result, and I can click to edit in the settings.js file. And you can see if I collapse things a little bit, I have some settings that I want to apply to every single commit message that Copilot writes, like prefix it with a related area, make sure titles are in lowercase, and Copilot will always consider that and respect that. You can see I also have some code generation instructions. So anytime I have a JavaScript project open in Visual Studio Code, these instructions will be considered on every single prompt. As a matter of fact, we can look at our most recent prompt and it used that as a reference. This would also apply in Java projects because I have Java instructions as well. Now you can see we also have this copilot-instructions.md file that's being taken into consideration. So these code generation instructions apply to any project that I open up in Visual Studio Code. These instructions apply specifically to this project, which is why they are saved as a file in the project. So again, you can specify instructions for Copilot to follow certain specifications for your project or for any project that you open up in these two different ways. All right, lovely. I know we took a bit of a detour there, but I wanted to make sure that I called out those features. All right, let's jump into version control. To have Copilot generate my commit message, I simply click these sparkles and it does according to my specifications. So I can go ahead and click commit and publish out the branch that we've been working in. And let's make sure that that goes on through. All right, looks like it did. So we can jump into GitHub, the remote version of the repo that we've been working in locally so far. And it looks like it maybe needs a refresh to pick up on the new branch. We can go ahead and just manually create the pull request. That's okay. Let's see, we'll go ahead and select the bug fixes branch, and there we go, create the pull request. All right, we can see that our commit was populated as the title and a little bit flowed into the description because it went over the character limit, I believe. But we can do better than this. We can actually have Copilot write our PR descriptions for us. And let me tell you, this has been a huge game changer for me because I did not I wasn't super fond of writing commit descriptions, but they were generally pretty easy and granular. But a pull request description was a pain because it was comprehensive of multiple commits and it would have to change when I got feedback and it was just not fun. But now Copilot writes these for me, so it takes away kind of a huge load. Again, what we were going back to about helping developers with those tasks they have to do but don't really enjoy doing. Now, before I create the pull request, I'm going to go ahead and request Copilot review it as well. The goal with Copilot pull request review is for it to really get the low-hanging fruit. So find issues that a human reviewer, again, might find tedious but need to be corrected so that humans can come in and focus on the more meaty architectural type changes of the pull request rather than the little things. All right, so I've gone ahead and requested that review from Copilot. Sometimes it does take some time for Copilot to complete the review, so we can definitely come back at the end of the presentation and see if Copilot has had a chance to publish its review by that time. All right, very good. So we've done some minor bug fixes, we've added some tests, these are all good things, but let's say I want to add a bit of a bigger feature. Well, that's when I would flip over from edit mode into what is called agent mode, and we'll go ahead and open a new session with that. And agent mode is a feature of Copilot that is designed to really help you implement things end to end. So when I say implement, I don't just mean write the code, I mean run any tests that are associated, or self-heal if it finds it's implemented something that it did wrong. It's really meant to be the peer programmer functionality of Copilot instead of being more of a pair programmer for developers. Alrighty, so we flipped over into agent mode, and you might have noticed that this new icon has popped up. And this essentially allows you to access what are called MCP servers that you have configured. MCP servers are a way for you to hook into various products. Like I have the GitHub one set up right now, but Figma has one, for example, Jira has one, and you can hook into those products and then pull in data from those products that can help enrich Copilot's context and help it work more effectively with you. So MCP servers are very, very exciting. And let's see what working with one might look like here. So let's say that I want to add a new feature to track races, right, in my Shoe Hero application. Right now we're just tracking generic activities, but I want to make sure that I remember the races that I've run and the shoes I did them in. So we can go ahead and create an issue tracking this work. I can say, I'm going to actually paste in a prompt here because it's rather long and I don't want you to have to watch me type it all out. But basically it's just asking Copilot to create an issue with a specific title and description. And it picked up on the fact that I wanted it to use the MCP server to do this. Now you can always allow certain commands and things like that, but I always check it because it sometimes thinks that my handle is Leslie, which, my goodness, I wish my handle was Leslie. I feel like that would just be so cool, but it's not. It's L. Dennington. So I will correct it and say the owner should be L. Dennington. And it should go ahead and correct to L. Dennington. We can check that and click continue. All right, very good. So it created the issue. Let's go ahead and jump back into our repo, take a look at the issues, and indeed a new issue was opened just now by Copilot. So lovely, according to our specifications. All right, now that we've got our issue tracking our work, we can go ahead and get down to business implementing our new feature. So I'm going to add another pretty detailed prompt here. And you can see that we're asking for new pages for races and API calls, and then I'm asking it to refer to an attached ERD. That attached ERD I have right here. I'm going to open it up. It essentially just shows Copilot, hey, this is how I want you to connect races to shoes, essentially. So I want it to update the database schema per the specifications of this ERD. I'm going to just drag and drop it as context. And that's a feature called Vision, which allows Copilot to look at something and implement the specification shown there. So obviously this is great for ERDs, or perhaps if you have a mock-up and want it to go ahead and implement that, you could do that as well. So you can see that Copilot has given us a breakdown of the tasks it has determined it needs to accomplish, and it's going to town starting on those tasks right now. Looks like it started on the database side, and this generally looks pretty good, so we can go ahead and keep it. And it's telling me, hey, you're probably going to need to run a migration for Prisma to add this new thing. And that is not wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and give it permission to do that. And it should go ahead and run the command for me here. And we will wait for the, it looks like that failed. So let's see if Copilot, yes, it's gone ahead and self-healed and added the appropriate field to shoes to make this command work. So we're gonna try to run it again. And it looks like it worked that time. So hopefully we can go ahead and proceed with these changes. All right, said, okay, that was successful. So we're gonna add some seed data. That was part of what I asked for in the prompt. And you'll notice that working with agent mode can take some time. That's generally because you're making a lot of requests on the back end. And also, my computer is quite old. I am on the verge of getting a laptop refresh, so I think that performance will be better based on the experience I've had when I'm on my personal computer using agent mode instead of my work computer. But as I mentioned before, you can always go through what it's implementing and check it and decide whether you want to keep it or not. So that's always good to be able to have a task that you're able to complete while Copilot is doing its thing. And it looks like we've gotten to the point where we've added some seed data, we've updated the database schema, we've added our API route. And this will happen sometimes, especially if you give it something big and meaty like this. You'll be asked whether you want it to continue working on your behalf. In this case, I do. I think it's making good progress and I don't want to impede that. So, and indeed, it's gone ahead and added the add race page, which is looking pretty good. It's looking pretty green. So we will elect to keep that. And it's added another page as well to view all of the races, I believe. So we will go ahead and elect to keep that. And this is looking pretty good. It's asking to install a new package here, it looks like, probably to help with the tests. So we can go ahead and do that, and hopefully that will succeed. So again, it's just iterating, it's installing things that it doesn't necessarily have, but is going to need. So this is the true benefit of agent mode and how a developer can really work with agent mode and have it take away a lot of these tedious things that they often have to do manually, which of course has been the theme of our presentation so far. So it looks like we do have a few issues in our test file. For example, we have an issue with brand, it looks like, that doesn't exist. So maybe if we just take that away, that will be okay. But let's see, maybe name, it's also saying doesn't exist. So we've definitely got some stuff going on with the tests. I don't know how much it would behoove us to try to fix these rather than maybe just removing them for the purposes of the demonstration and then coming back later and adding them ourselves. But in general, it seems like Copilot has done pretty gosh darn well implementing that big feature that I asked for. So let's go ahead and make sure our application is still running. It is. However, we might want to just do a quick restart. Sometimes with big changes like these, there can be breaks if you don't restart the server. So we'll do that. We'll jump back over into the app and we'll see if we can add a new race here. And lo and behold, we have this lovely race form. So I can say, hey, Boston. And I think that it was some Monday in April, you know, we'll just pretend it was the 12th. I don't think it was actually the 12th, but that's okay. And I can't type, but we got there. Alrighty, very good. Boston, 26.2, and we'll pretend we ran it and we were in Hoka's. All right, very good. So add that race. And we're redirected to a races page, which is tracking Boston. Now, we didn't run the seed script, but if we had, we would probably see some additional races here as well. All right, awesome. So that is about all that I had to show. We can jump back into our pull request and see if Copilot has had a chance to publish that review yet. And it did indeed go ahead and add that. It gives us an overview of the pull request and a couple of comments on things that it might suggest improving. So you can see we get a really nice diff view and have the ability to just go ahead and commit these suggestions directly in the pull request, which is really, really nice. So yeah, very good experience with Copilot as a reviewer. You can see that they were tinier changes, right? Not super significant. Again, going back to Copilot just getting the low hanging fruit there. All right, very good. So before we go, I do want to return to our presentation and talk a little bit, as I promised back at the very beginning, about the agentic future of Copilot, because it's pretty exciting. So we saw Copilot operating in agent mode, we saw it iterating, we saw it running commands, but that was all locally and kind of still needed to be babysat by the developer. For example, me having to go in and remove the tests and come back to them later. With SWE agents, that is no longer going to be the case. Essentially, SWE agents are going to be present on the GitHub platform, and they are going to allow a developer to take an issue, for example, and say, hey, SWE agent, I want you to go and implement the specifications of this issue. And in the background, Copilot will spin up its own environment and it will do the implementation and iterate and write tests and then submit everything once complete as a pull request for the developer to review. So again, just taking away tedious things from developers, making that workflow as streamlined as possible and have minimal involvement from developers there so that they can go and worry about these super challenging and fun things that make the job of a developer so exciting and enticing to developers. All right. That's all that I had for you today. Thank you so much for bearing with me and watching the presentation. I hope that you learned from it and enjoyed it.